It's been a milestone week here in Starbase. The water-cooled flame diverters for Pad B have finally rolled to the launch site. And as if that wasn't enough, Booster 14-2 rolled back to the production site, while Ship 35 started to show signs that it's going to be ready to roll out for engine testing soon. All while demolition of the High Bay and STARGATE buildings continued. Oh, and we did a flyover this week, so we'll take a look at the remarkable progress on Pad B and everywhere around Starbase from the air. Howdy, Star Partners. I'm Beyer for NSF, and this is your Starbase Update. Let's start this week's update by taking a look at the production site from the air. There's been a ton of development on the infrastructure here since we last flew, but conversely, there's also been a lot of demolition as well. Yes, it's nearly time to say goodbye to the High Bay. The dismantling of it has been underway for a bit, but this last week, we've seen SpaceX remove the upper layer of the building completely, as well as the massive bridge crane structure at the top of it. The nighttime views of sparks raining down as they chop up the structure have been truly beautiful, even though they're bittersweet because they herald the end of this venerable structure. As you can see from the air, basically everything at the top is completely gone and removed. Don't fret though, you can also see the giant amount of room that SpaceX is now freeing up with this change. This huge footprint will become the new Giga Bay that is going to be built here. Part of that footprint is the STARGATE building next to the old High Bay. This building was opened in March of 2019, and its name is an acronym for Spacecraft Tracking and Astronomical Research into Gigahertz Astrophysical Transient Emission. Say that 3 times fast. It was built as a public-private partnership between CARA, the Center for Advanced Radio Astronomy, the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, and SpaceX. Remember the old tracking station that has long since been dismantled to make way for more employee housing and parking? That's what those dishes were there for. The stated goals of the STARGATE project were to establish a world-class physics department at University of Texas Brownsville and to help make South Texas a leader in space exploration. I'd say at least one of those 2 goals has been achieved. So with the STARGATE building having been leveled to make space for the Giga Bay, we have to say goodbye to one of the last remaining vestiges of the early Starship days. I really hope that at least the University of Texas is still able to have a presence here in Starbase and still continue to help young minds learn about things that interest them. So goodbye STARGATE, thanks for your usefulness to students, science, and SpaceX. Fun fact, STARGATE is also the building in which I met Elon that one time. But not only High Bay and STARGATE are going away. Continuing their trend of building nice things and then demolishing them right after, the fancy new Star Factory entrance next to the ring yard is also going away, as we've mentioned in previous episodes. This week, we can see SpaceX has clearly marked that area for dismantling, and teams have even started removing the big roll-up door that we've seen nose cones and payload structures roll out of many times now. Presumably, the Star Factory and Giga Bay will be joined as one when everything is done being built, just like Mega Bay 2 and the Star Factory are connected now. Quick update also from the LR11000 crane segments we've been keeping an eye on in the SpaceX storage yard. It seems that some of these were sent away for repairs and are gone from the storage site, which, yeah, actually, thanks Adrian, Adrian wrote this script. I do remember driving past some crane parts on their way out of Starbase this week. Let's now move over to the rocket garden. In our last update, we saw Ship 20 getting shuffled around, which we were a bit flummoxed by at the time. Well, we can now infer a little bit more. Looking at the aerial views, we can now see that SpaceX is performing a revamp of the area and is working on the road next to the rocket garden. This is most likely why Ship 20 had to move, to make space for that construction. Hopefully that means they're not going to scrap Ship 20. Hopefully. Naturally, since it's been a little while since our last flyover, comparing pictures from then to now, we can also see the extreme progress that SpaceX has made on the Star Factory and office building. Heck, the office building wasn't even fully built the last time we flew. Recently, SpaceX also had some workers working on the facade of the Star Factory and office building connection. This looks like they're changing out some of the paneling maybe, probably for an aesthetic reason. We can also see some workers present doing just this on the flyover pictures. Right next to the Star Factory, SpaceX is building some prime real estate. This new apartment complex at St. Martin Boulevard is making great progress. Well, the foundation of it is anyway. There is still quite a lot to do here, but it's being prepared for the above-ground construction to come. This will provide a significant boost in housing availability for the ever-growing population here in Starbase, Texas. Now, let's give some of the prototype vehicles some attention. These are not part of the next flight stack, but are still part of the impressive production line that SpaceX has been ramping up here to produce Starships faster and faster. Let's start with a quick trip to the Massey outpost, where Booster 17 was parked last week in preparation for cryogenic proof testing. Note, the booster does not yet have any Raptor engines installed. Those are installed later after cryogenic proof testing. On April 8th, the first cryogenic proof test was performed on Booster 17 at Massey's, with a second cryo test following shortly after on the 9th. It's not unusual to see multiple cryo tests on the same vehicle, as SpaceX tests different tanks individually and then together. They really want to make sure to verify the structural integrity of each booster ahead of engine outfitting. When Caesar and I flew over, Booster 17 was present at the Massey outpost. You can also see that the new cap that boosters have these days has been installed on it and is covering up some more of the sensitive bits of the booster at the top of the forward dome. This cap is non-permanent and will be removed once the booster receives its hot staging ring. You can also see that the booster still lacks the 4 grid fins, which are also not installed yet. Next to the booster, we can see work on the second cryo proof stand being built. This is the one that will be used for the next generation of boosters, which we expect to start with Booster 18, but really who knows. The most notable change here is the fact that this booster test stand will feature 2 booster quick disconnects. So even faster fueling of the booster might be a thing we can expect with the next revision. SpaceX appears to be on pace to fuel Starship up significantly faster than Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy, which feature significantly less propellant, something I'm still struggling to wrap my brain around. In addition to the new cryo stand at the Massey outpost, we can also see that the liquid oxygen farm might be getting a new expansion soon, as indicated by these new embeds in the ground for a potential new LOX tank, which will be installed there. Another item of significant work we could observe this last week at the Massey outpost is the structural test stand, which is on the other side of Massey's. This article is usually used to test smaller structural test tanks to verify their load capabilities. This is exactly what we hope to soon be happening with Test Tank 17, which we suspect is a Block 2 booster aft test article, something they can use to test the all-important engine section of the new boosters. The current modifications of these test stands are most likely to prepare them for what they'll need to do on the potentially multiple test tanks to come. Test Tank 17 may just be the first up, depending on how it performs. No matter what though, we'll keep our eyes on it to make sure we understand as much as we can about it. And speaking of keeping our eyes on Test Tank 17, its aft section was rolled into Giga Bay 1 this weekend. This is the section that features the booster landing tank. This is the engine section. So this is most likely to verify a lot of the design properties for the next generation of boosters, including its aft section integrity. I did try to get a photo looking into Giga Bay 1 when we were doing our flyover, but the door was only open a little tiny sliver and the lighting basically made it impossible, so sorry we couldn't do more there, but hopefully it rolls out soon. Moving now to the other prototypes at the production site, we can report that Ship 37 stacking is continuing in Giga Bay 2. A barrel section rolled into Giga Bay 2 during the week, and also its transfer tubes were installed over the course of the week as well. Ship 37 still has some time until it will become the star of the show, but with the current pace of the program, it's not ruled out that it might be a candidate for the first ship catch, depending on how the next few flights go. Speaking of potential catch candidates, let's talk about Ship 36. 36 is still missing a lot of tiles, and for yet another week, we're all sort of wondering what's going on with that. Maybe SpaceX is just waiting for results from upcoming flights to see how Ship does on re-entry before fully committing and completing the heat shield on 36. Maybe their only tile kiln thingy broke and it's gonna take forever to get another one. Who knows? Luckily though, it's just not a high priority to complete right now, and maybe it's just that simple. We will see in the future what fate has in store for 36, but for now, we wait. Let's talk about boosters. It seems more and more likely that the flight after the next flight, that'll be Flight 10, will feature another booster reuse, as Booster 15 has been moved from the Rocket Garden to Giga Bay 1. This is most likely to prepare it for its second flight. If we compare that with the timeline of Booster 14, this could line up for a flight of Booster 15 on potentially Flight 10 or 11, depending on the pace. Of course, this makes sense. Booster 14 is already going for reuse on the next flight, so reusing this booster that was caught right after it is probably a very reasonable decision. SpaceX is already very confident in pushing for booster reusability, with just 8 flights of Starship so far. If that's not impressive to you, then I seriously don't know what would be. Here's a few smaller updates on other prototypes at the production site. Ship 38 has received its forward flaps, so that ship is also progressing down the production pipeline as well, even though it's still very much in pieces. Meanwhile, the nose cone for Ship 39 got its LOX header tank, as we spotted the header tank earlier in the week, and then spotted it the next day with its nose cone sleeved on top of it. And it goes even further than that. I spotted what might be Ship 40's methane header tank as well. That's over 5 prototypes of Starship currently in the production line that SpaceX is assembling right now. Just that we can see. This is just one production line on one side of this massive factory. There's almost certainly a ton going on that we just don't ever see. Okay, let's now move on to the big ticket item of this week, and that was for sure Pad B. There's been so much movement of different Pad B items, and we'll get an extra special look at everything from the air. Let's start with the launch mount. The mount is of course still parked at the Sanchez site where it's being built. This week though, with our aerial views, we can get a better understanding of exactly what we're looking at. The launch mount itself seems to be more and more complete, with the deck looking mostly done. We can still see a lot of scaffolding and work going on inside of the mount, but of course this could all be wrapped up and removed relatively fast. As we always say, the removal of this scaffolding will be a huge tell in terms of when the mount is going to roll to the launch site. Scaffolding still there? Not rolling anytime soon. Scaffolding goes away, be prepared for a roll. It's so simple. In this picture, you can also see what might be installation points for Raptor access points. It's not clear if SpaceX will even use the Raptor spin-up system from Pad A on Pad B, as the 2 QDs they will use for the booster on booster block 2 might be enough to just spin start the whole booster from the QD, instead of using external booster quick disconnect attachments. Of course, only time will tell, but that is the current leading theory of what might be the spin start system for Pad B. This goes with the old adage, the best part is no part, so it won't be surprising if the booster QDs for the outer 20 engines go away. This means there's less stress and hardware on the pad itself. We've seen how much refurbishment and detailed painstaking work is required at Pad A after every single flight. So any simplifications like this to help speed up turnover time and build up redundancy and increase flight rate will help out the Starship program in general. But wait, there's even more good news. SpaceX is also progressing with work on the ship quick disconnect arm for Pad B that has been seemingly laying fallow for quite some time now. This arm has seen basically no attention for the past few months, but on our flyover, you can see parts laying around and workers and machinery present again at the arm. So it seems SpaceX is starting to push to finish this particular piece of infrastructure as well now, to make it ready for launches on Pad B. What is still missing though is the sort of wrist piece for the arm. It's the more articulated end of the ship QD, and we still haven't seen any signs of it. This piece's absence could mean that SpaceX is still in the process of redesigning the ship QD part of the arm, in preparation for some other changes on the ship itself perhaps. Let's move our attention now to the giant flame bucket. This will be the main deflector of acoustic and thermal energy for Pad B and an integral part of its flame trench. Well, guess what happened this week? The scaffolding around it was removed. You know what that means? Rollout time. The giant flame bucket always looked kinda silly from the ground, as you can only really see the very end of the pipes that go up diagonally. I know Das has called them Flintstone-style brontosaurus ribs in some of our summary videos, but in this flyover, you can fully grasp the absolute unit of a flame bucket that this thing is. You can also see on the flame bucket that it forms some kind of pattern. This is what will be the exhaust pattern of the Raptor engines, and it seems that SpaceX adjusted it based on what they think will be needed. On the subject of next generation hardware, we can see that the next generation booster transport stand has its arms laying next to it, so it seems these will go in fairly soon. This booster transport stand has been sitting around forever and we had no idea why, but now it seems like it'll be different from the previous ones, and we expect this is because it's going to support Block 2 of boosters. The best thing about this week's flyover, to me, is that we flew just a few hours before the flame buckets were rolled to the launch site. This means we can get a close look at the flame trench work on Pad B just before they were installed and really grasp the progression here. You can see the amount of concrete pouring that already has happened on the west side of the flame trench, as they are now working on the east side of the trench as well. In fact, as we flew over, a concrete pump was present and pumping more concrete into the flame trench. You can also see the giant gantry on one side of the pad that is being built up, and the pipes being laid to support this giant pad with fuel and water later. In general, the giant cryo trench has been constructed as well, although it seems that it still has a good amount of space for more pipes to be placed there. Especially a bit more away from the pad, next to the tower, you can see that the cryo trench is still mostly empty. Speaking of pipes, Some of the green deluge pipes that will supply the flame bucket with deluge water for static fires and launches were also visible. Further up on the tank farm, you can see that the green pipe hasn't been hooked up to anything yet and is missing pieces in multiple places around the tank farm. But there's other pieces laying around that might fill in these gaps. This is plumbing on a truly massive scale. To the side of the trench, you can see that wall segments inside of the trenches were already installed, and the hole in the middle where the flame buckets will set down on is placed as well. If you look into it from the other angle, we can see another concrete truck preparing the wall for the tower side, as there is a form present there for the giant concrete wall. You can see that the two giant holes in that wall, which could hook up to the deluge pipes if you compare that to where the green pipes come out of the wall. Overall, the concrete that you can see here will not be exposed in any shape or form to the fire of 33 Raptor engines. Based on the frames and the points to place the flame bucket along the floor of the trench will seemingly transition to steel plates without exposing any of its concrete. Now let's take a look at the Pad B tank farm. We have a much greater understanding of how commodities will flow and what subcoolers will be used for what. To start off, you may be asking how SpaceX splits the main LOX line so that 5 pumps are for the booster and 4 are for the ship, while maintaining an adequate flow rate. Well, right here, the main LOX supply line splits in 2, with the top part going to the booster pumps and the bottom split going to the ship pumps. Once split, these then go to their respective pumps by going up and through a valve and a basket strainer. Unlike Pad A, SpaceX has opted to use a basket strainer or filter at each pump, and not just one at the main inlet and one at the return line. Once through the pumps, the LOX will then hit these manifolds here, 5 pumps hooked up to the booster manifold and 4 pumps hooked up to the ship manifold. After getting pumped from the tanks and into these manifolds, the LOX then goes into these subcoolers. This is where it can get a little bit tricky to understand where everything is going. So for the sake of the video, we'll just say that they go through the subcoolers in these lines and then out along the pipe rack, which will then hook into the cryo trench. Once there, the LOX and eventually the methane, which hasn't even been built yet, will split between the gantry and the tower. It's going to be really interesting to see SpaceX test all of this equipment once it's in place. It was really fun to see that at Pad A when they installed the flame diverter there, so hopefully we get treated to a similar fun time with this new arrangement. The question becomes if SpaceX will test with the launch mount already in place, or will we be treated to tests with an open deck where we just get to see the whole system firing through the pipes. That would be cool. Later in the week, just hours after we flew, we saw what we expected based on pictures from that flight. The flame bucket started to roll out to the launch site. SpaceX wasted no time once it arrived either, getting it lifted and placed inside the flame trench. Now that that's done, teams can continue to prepare the flame trench for the installation of the orbital launch mount, which will be installed on top of it to support the booster during launch. If you compare this hardware versus Pad 1, it is quite a change in terms of how much work and infrastructure is being placed here. And of course, the flame trench is a huge installation versus the much smaller deluge plate on Pad A. It'll be very interesting to see how this affects the plume and smoke dynamics during a liftoff, and maybe, even maybe, it'll just help photographers take better pictures. Over at the tank farm, there is a ton of progress dedicated to improvements for Pad B. We see more subcoolers, cryo pumps, vaporizers, and more being installed day by day. And of course, this is very visible during our flyover. You can also see the power bunkers being stored to the side of the road behind the wall as SpaceX is preparing an upgrade of the power and electrical systems at the launch site. The deluge tank farm for Pad B has a slew of tanks installed, and it seems it's mostly complete from what we can tell. At least, we cannot see any further stands that are placed to support any future tanks. Yet. We can even get a good clue of how many of the new LOX pumps and valve skids are being used for each side of the infrastructure. On the methane side, the work is still a bit behind, with the pumps just now going up. But one can expect a very similar setup and a split for the methane side versus the LOX side. SpaceX is also working on hooking up their new methane tanks, and it seems like they might soon be fully integrated into the tank farm once the hookup is fully complete. This will help to increase the overall capacity of the tank farm a whole bunch. In things we don't like, the concrete wall is going up more and more west, and we can see SpaceX is not done yet with building it as more of the frame is visible even more to the west. I'll go on the record that I don't like more walls being built, but hey, it's SpaceX, it's their property, they can do what they want with it. Before we move on to Pad A, let's look at the construction going on at the new Starbase roundabout. For people who missed it, this will allow cars to easily turn around at the end of Highway 4 without driving on the beach. This has caused a lot of cars to get stuck at the end of the highway in the sand over the years. Plus, it'll make it easier for the big 18-wheelers in the tank farm to turn around. They don't have to do like a crazy million-point turn like Austin Powers. Half the roundabout is basically done, and work on the other half looks like it's progressing smoothly, so this thing should be done before we know it. Let's bring our attention now to the next flight. Looking at Pad A, we can see that the booster is gone. Booster 14-2, after its successful static fire, was removed from the launch mount. This is all very much expected. Boosters usually undergo some final inspections of the engines, installation of the hot staging ring, and a bunch more, and that's all easier to do at the production site instead of here at the launch site. Furthermore, it frees up the launch mount for its needed inspections and refurbishment ahead of flight. Regarding Ship 35, it seems that the ship has received its aft flaps. You know why that's so important? Well, because on previous ships, it's gotten its aft flaps around the same time as its engines. The rollout for static fire has then happened a few days later. Indeed, on Saturday, we saw at least one Raptor being moved to Mega Bay 2, so hopefully Ship 35 rollout in static fire will be happening soon. This would then clear the hardware readiness hurdle for Flight 9, which should be the final milestone for a return to flight of Starship in May. Yes, most likely May. The chance of Starship flying in April is basically zero at this point, but hey, I could always be wrong. Let's move on to some other Starship items at the Space Coast and McGregor. By the way, if you really like flyovers, then make sure to stay tuned to this channel later in the week. We have a flyover of the Cape coming as well. In fact, our Cape team flew on the same day as Caesar and I flew over Boca Chica. So NSF had two aircraft in the air at the same moment, capturing the progress of Starship and other spaceflight programs all around the United States. This update also features quite a significant update on the 39A launch mount, which helps us understand the launch mount here in Boca Chica quite a bit better as well. So again, if you like flyovers, keep your eyes on our channel a little bit later in the week. Taking a quick peek at McGregor, my hat! Taking a quick peek at SpaceX's engine testing facility in McGregor, Texas, we saw 13 Raptor tests over the course of the week on a bunch of different stands. Some of these are old Raptor version 2s, and some are the new Raptor version 3, at least that's what we assume. One significant event is the duration of a test on the horizontal stand that had a Raptor firing for 460 seconds. That is a record for that particular test stand, although not a record for Raptor overall. Meanwhile, the 372-second profile, which is a profile we see quite a lot and mentioned in last week's update, speculating that it might be related to ship ascent burn testing, was tested on multiple test stands. Another profile we saw was 260 seconds. This is what we expect Raptor version 3's firing profile to be. If this is the case, we saw 3 Raptor version 3 tests this week, which of course might be one engine or 3 different engines or some combination thereof. And that's it. With a bit of luck, we might see a static fire of Ship 35 over the course of the week, and might have a better picture of what will be the exact time for Flight 9. Of course, you'll be the first to learn it as long as you stay tuned to us here. As always, thanks for watching, and don't forget, be excellent to each other.